Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Wake Up and on the show. Trump wants his intelligence officials to go back to school. Should they? Who's being naive? Find out on the show. Thank you so much for waking up with us here today. It's the Wake Up on a Thursday morning. This week gone by pretty quick. At least for me, anyway. We still do have 2 days left, and 2 shows left to get to, so let's just do it. Alright, so yeah, a little polar vortex continuing here. I'm going to be following that for you, but first, all things on the global stage are coming up. Russia. President Trump's very public disagreement with his own intelligence chiefs this week is more than just a domestic rift. Analysts say it also leaves a large opening for the frenemy Vladimir Putin, who's been flexing Russia's muscles internationally in a return to Cold War-style posturing, as the United States leaves an increasingly large vacuum on the world stage. So President Trump seethed with anger after he watched highlights of the Capitol Hill testimony from his intelligence chiefs on Wednesday morning, in which they contradicted pretty much everything he had said on Russia, North Korea, China, and the U.S. And ISIS. We talked about yesterday that threat assessment thing that got released, and a lot of what Trump said, was proven wrong, especially about the border. And about ISIS, and about Iran as well. So, yeah, there's that. Trump also, according to CNN, singled out Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats by name during this morning rant, saying that snippets of Coats saying that North Korea halted its provocative behavior related to the WMD program was unlikely to give up nuclear weapons and production capabilities angered him. He tweeted that and intelligence officials go back to school, and he deemed them extremely passive and naive, especially on Iran. And this is literally the only part where he's more right wing than those intelligence officials, because he comes from he's kind of like a paleocon in that sense, where all they do is just it's one of the key traits of how you can identify a paleocon in the wild. They really want to bomb Iran. Iran is the end all be all, and he has all these people around him. And I really don't believe that he's a paleocon, but just a lot of people around him, like John Bolton. John Bolton. You got Sean Hannity. Who knows who else? Who's coming in saying, "Oh, we need to." Iran is the one who's not violating this who's ignoring this nuclear deal, and that really makes things worse for him in his mind, because he's like, "Oh yeah, we need to bomb Iran. That's what we need to do." So yeah, that's kind of the dynamic at play here, and it is very, very strange, very, very strange thing to deal with and see take place on a daily basis. So, Trump's private anger and public attacks on his agencies of intelligence over their contradictory assessments of foreign threats to the United States spelled out what has emboldened Putin to be a bigger player on the world stage. Analysts say Putin's driven by pragmatism rather than an old-school proto-socialist foreign policy in the Soviet era. So the thing is, Putin he's a very right-wing guy. He really holds no allegiance to the socialists of old. That's going to be a very important thing to understand. So, interesting quote from Jeffrey Mankoff, Deputy Director and Senior Fellow of the Center for Strategic International Studies, Russia and Eurasia's program, said that I think most of the Russians I talked to are as puzzled by this as anyone else. I think the fact that this is a very public disagreement here about what the nature of the Russia challenge is makes it less likely the U.S. is going to have a unified vision of what Russia policy should look like, which gives Putin some certain opportunities. So, yeah, on that note, Venezuela. Putin is spearheading support among U.S. adversaries for the embattled President Nicolas Maduro after Russia accused the United States of orchestrating a coup following the Trump administration's official recognition of opposition leader Juan Guaido as Venezuela's interim president. The arrival of a Russian airplane surprised Venezuela watchers when it landed in Caracas on Monday night, sparking unproven claims President Nicolas Maduro's administration is looking to whisk what's left of the nation's depleted gold reserves out of the country. So, that's going to be another thing that they're kind of possibly preparing for, and Russia's there to help them, pretty much by their side as the U.S. kind of drags its feet about this a little bit. And by the way, it's going to be very important, like, to see how they handle this, because there is a case to be made that Venezuela should be left alone by the United States, and this kind of continuing action got us into a fight for no reason, and that's something that we just didn't need to do. Like, why are we in Russia? Why are we in Venezuela? We shouldn't have just been organizing opposition where there wasn't any. But yeah, it's just not our job. It's not our responsibility as a country, and when we do it, things only get worse. That kind of would have been my approach to it, but obviously we're seeing a much different approach over this very interventionist administration here. So that's a pretty important thing to deal with. So yeah, military analyst Alexander Goltz told the New York Times that Neil McFarquhar he's a reporter for the New York Times. Told him that Russia's relationship with Venezuela mirrored the foreign policy of the old Soviet Union, which the Kremlin lavished arms and money for any country that barked at Washington. For Putin, the fight against color revolutions is a principal matter. It's not important where they happen in Syria or Venezuela. Any attempt to get by local people to get rid of an authoritarian leader is seen by Russian leadership as a conspiracy masterminded by foreign intelligence. And I mean, like, we don't know the full role of what we see or the events that have gone down in Venezuela. We don't know the full role the U.S. played in it, and possibly pushing Juan Guaido to get in on this a little more. But there is, I think we can all be real here. There's a certain possibility that there was a large part of this was played in by the United States, like, just based on their actions in the past. I'm sure these protests were pretty authentic either way. But the fact that I really would, I think, like to know, I think it'd be important to know what kind of communication was there on the front. So, like, what kind of communication did the Team Washington have with Team USA on this one? Over on North Korea's end, earlier this week, the Post's John Hudson and Ellen Nakashima scooped the Russians that secretly offered the North Koreans for a nuclear power plant in Moscow in exchange for nuclear disarmament. So, yeah, that's a very sketchy situation. It's not just North Korea, Venezuela, and Syria, also part of the Russian expanding geopolitical clout in places the U.S. is neglecting. Putin has his sights set on Algeria, Egypt, Uganda, Zimbabwe, and a long list of commercial engagements across Africa. But the U.S. retreat, with the U.S. retreat, there is space for Moscow to be more mischievous. Its optics, to a certain extent, smoke and mirrors to present itself as a global power. So that's going to be something that they'll be looking to do. The bottom line here is that Russia has been for a long time been arguing that the era of the U.S. domination is ending, and that creates opportunities for other players. And boy, by meddling in the U.S. election against Trump, he's been proven right. I wonder why he tried to do that. So that's a very interesting situation here that we all have seen unfolding here. And so it's going to be continue to watch Russia's growing role here on the world stage. But on the other hand, Russia is continuing its disinformation campaign, apparently against Robert Mueller now. In addition to Putin's recent spate of geopolitical moves, the Department of Justice alleged on Wednesday that Russia continued to try and discredit Bob Mueller's investigation after a pro-Russian Twitter account spread confidential information about a criminal case that Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team had brought against a Russian company for social media conspiracy. That's a little sketchy. Prosecutors are alleging that some of the confidential information turned over to Russian company Concord Management and Consulting, accused of funding a social media effort aimed at swaying American voters in 2016, after a now suspended Twitter user touted that it had a Mueller database in a computer with a Russian IP address, published thousands of documents online. So that's a little interesting there. A little chilling that they decided to do that, and probably a mistake to do. But again, I guess they just don't really play by their rules. So on that note, we go from craziness in the world to craziness right here at home. On the Hill, House Democrats unveiled their opening bid in negotiations to stave off a government shutdown on February 15th, and it doesn't contain, no surprise here, money for a big, beautiful physical barrier along the southern border. That's a big problem for Trump, again, who insists he will not shy away from forcing another shutdown or declaring a national emergency if he doesn't get the $5.7 billion asking price for his signature campaign promise, a wall. 17 lawmakers met yesterday for the first time as part of a conference committee charged with producing a negotiation on the solution negotiate a solution on the immigration issue before the government funding runs out again in just 2 weeks. Trump tweeted Wednesday that any conference committee that's not contemplating a wall or physical barrier, they're just wasting their time. The key quote here is that we've seen that walls can be tunneled under, cut through, or scaled. This is Pete Aguilar of California, according to Erica Werner, John Wagner, and Mike DeBonis. And by the way, based on the type of immigration, I've said this millions of times, I feel like, but based on the type of immigration that we have now, there's no way, like, none of the major parts of immigration could be, like, stopped by a wall. Like, it would probably have a little bit of a dent, but it would be no significant dent. It wouldn't even be a big enough dent to kind of like buck the law. Trying to make it apparently so clearly obvious that this wall that we spend so much money on would be fine. So yeah, the problem here is that lawmakers insisted that they agree more than they disagree, but the gap between Trump and the congressional Democrats on the fundamental issue of the wall yawned as wide as ever. Asked whether no physical barriers is non-negotiable for Democrats, House Appropriations Chair Nita Lowey, my representative, said, "At this point, I'm certainly not going to give an answer to that question." Interesting. Meanwhile, the White House Legislative Affairs Director Shahira Knight met with the Problem Solvers Caucus, some members of whom complained they didn't have a clear idea of where Trump would be willing to cede ground. My colleagues of the Washington Post report. There's the Pesquille Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky told the GOP chairman in a meeting yesterday he wants a way out. "We're praying for you. Get this done." He instructed negotiators on the conference committee, according to Politico's Burgess Everett. The Majority Leader was slammed for being AWOL during the last shutdown and now is apparently doing all he can to prevent a redux of what Republican members viewed as a extremely damaging situation. The Kentucky Republican pretty much viewed the recent episodes as largely out of his control, the product of a clash between Trump and Democratic leaders. But now that the government's reopened, the GOP leader finally has thrown himself into preventing the next impasse. And I mean, at least, you can tell this guy does not care at all about the wall. He just does not care at all. And I mean, will he be able to crush his will he be able to kind of like crush him like a grape, pretty much, or not? Like, that's the question. That's what we want to know. All this is to say, though, that Trump does have a tough road ahead. Mitch McConnell out there trying to crush the next shutdown like a grape, just like he threatened to do Joe Manchin. Go read Cliff Sims' book if you want to. I know I just gave a free promo to Cliff Sims, but still, it's a pretty good book. Looks like it anyway. Reporters from the Post lay out some of the ways here that Trump administration is facing increasingly adversarial Congress here from both parties. Senior Republicans are warning him that away from a national emergency declaration and build a border wall, the top Senate leader is directly rebuking his national security policy in Syria and Afghanistan, and Democratic committee chairs are threatening subpoenas for his top officials. For an administration that's largely been accommodated by Republican lawmakers during its first 2 years, President Trump is facing increasingly adversarial Congress, eager to assert itself on management foreign policy and oversight. Outside the Beltway, interesting story here, very interesting, very important as well. ProPublica's David Armstrong got hold of a secret portion of a previously redacted paragraphs of Massachusetts' 274-page civil complaint against Purdue Pharma, the company that apparently, not content with billions of dollars in profits from potent painkiller OxyContin, explored expanding into an attractive market fueled by the drug's popularity. The treatment of opioid addiction. So they got America addicted to opioids, and they said, okay, now we're going to be able to treat them. We're going to be able to treat you. Like, the reason why so many people have been killed in this country, far too many, of the basis of possibly killing pain. And now they're just going to come through and say, okay, this is a better idea. The opioid crisis has resulted, again, in 200,000 overdose deaths related to prescription opioids since 1999, according to Armstrong, a staggering figure that many attribute to the aggressive marketing campaign around OxyContin. In internal correspondence beginning in 2014, and this is very important, Purdue Pharma executives discussed how the sale of opioids and treatment of opioid addiction are naturally linked, and the company should expand across the pain and addiction spectrum. According to redacted sections of the lawsuit by the Massachusetts Attorney General,